At our national meeting last year, we had actress Marsha Cross attend, and she is an anal cancer survivor. And she brought up a really good point during the public Q&A, which is, what do we mean when we say the body clears HPV? So if I've had a negative HPV test over several years, but then suddenly I have a positive test, or I've been diagnosed with abnormal cells in my cervix, does that mean that I've have a new infection, or is that possibly an old infection that's just been sort of sleeping in my body for a while, that's now woken up and is causing some problems?
This is an evolving field, again, because we haven't known how to look for HPV for very long, but there is definitely evidence that HPV infections can reactivate. So what we mean when we say clearance is just that the HPV infection has become undetectable. And while it's undetectable, it is not doing any active damage. However, there are studies that indicate that the majority of infections in women between the ages of 35 and 65 are reactivations and not new infections. If someone has a new partner, then it's much more likely to be a new infection. But if someone is not in a relationship or is in a long-term monogamous relationship, it's more likely to be a reactivation than a new infection.
And am I correct that most people will be exposed to HPV sort of when they're younger? So a woman such as myself in her 40s, or a person with a cervix in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, it's not that all of a sudden they've had some new exposure, but it could be an HPV infection that they got in their 20s that is just sort of waking up, right?
Right. So it's much more highly associated with the total lifetime number of sexual partners. So generally, over 5 sexual partners in the lifetime is much more associated with reactivation in later life.
If you get HPV, do you always have HPV, or is it like a cold virus and you can sort of clear it, but you might get it again?
That's a really good question. What we don't know is how often it reactivates. We sort of have this indirect evidence that it seems more likely that in most of these patients, it must be a reactivation because they don't report any new exposures. But we don't know if someone, has HPV when they're 22, how likely is it that it will show up again when they're 45? That's just not something that we have data for, especially because we don't tend to test, most HPV infections are acquired between the ages of 18 and 26, and that's not even an age, 18 to 24, we don't even test for HPV. So it's going to be a really difficult question to answer.
Got it. So it sounds like the best prevention is to not get HPV in the first place. And we luckily have a vaccine that is very effective at preventing HPV infection.